natin dito at yung gusto nating baguhin. Hindi lang dekada, kundi ilang centuries ng mga kalakaran, ng mga institusyon na deeply embedded, hindi lang sa gobyerno, kundi sa ating kultura. Pag sinabi natin yung palakasan, ako hindi ko naman sinasabi na, kunyari dito sa Pasig, as mayor, hindi ko naman sinasabi na in 1 year or 1.5 years, natanggal ko na lahat ng palakasan sa LGU. Hindi. In fact, I'm guilty of it as well. I catch myself also minsan, teka, parang mali yung decision ko dun, parang palakasan yun ah. Nangyayari pa rin yun. Kasi itong yung binabangga natin, hindi lang siya, hindi lang siya yung madadali lang na pwedeng baguhin overnight. You can trace yung palakasan system or patronage politics. You trace that the roots are not just 10, 20 years, but all the way back to Spanish times, all the way back to hundreds and hundreds of years of the same practices have been repeated and repeated until they've become normalized and institutionalized and very deeply embedded or ingrained in our culture. Yun yung binabangga natin. But I'd like to end with this one last thought before we open for the question and answer. Oftentimes when we look at the news, we see bad news. Normal naman yun, syempre, ang mas na-feature sa news, masasamang balita, At marami naman talagang masamang balita. But sometimes it can be, as young idealist leaders, I know it can be very frustrating. I get frustrated myself. I get frustrated very often. But if we look at things, if we take a little step back and let's really take a look. What are the potentials? What are the opportunities that we have today, in this day and age? Many, many years ago, if you wanted to get a message across, you wanted to talk to someone, kailangan face-to-face. Yung ginagawa natin na ganito, 100 years ago, hindi pwede. Baka nga 10 years ago, hindi natin magagawa to. And then eventually, certain technologies were invented. Nagkaroon ng telegrama, nagkaroon ng mailing system, nagkaroon ng tri-media, TV, radio, newspapers. Medyo bumilis ng konti yung komunikasyon. Pero ang problema doon, kahit TV, sabihin natin, mass media talaga siya. Maraming nakakanood ng isang TV show, for example, presidential address, maraming makakanood. The problem with that is that it's very limited. Kailangan either nasa poder ka, talagang ikaw yung presidente, ikaw yung prime minister, yung mga ganyan, or ikaw yung may-ari ng stasyon, may pera ka, sobrang yaman ka, o sobrang sikat ka. So the access is very limited. Who can give their messages, very limited. But in 1989, incidentally, that was the year I was born, the World Wide Web was invented by a man named Tim Berners-Lee. And eventually, it became what we know today as the internet. A little later than that, there was email and then social media. Now, we have all the tools. We have all the tools at the tip of at our fingertips. Communication goes by so fast, and of course we know that it's a double-edged sword. Lahat ng potential nito para sa kabutihan, may katumbas din yan na potential para sa kasamaan. And we've seen how it's used for fake news, for historical revisionism. We see that every day. We see that. But the point I'm trying to make is that the potential is there. Nasa sa atin kung paano natin gagamitin eh. What the things that happened, ito malapit na mag-Bonifacio Day. Isipin natin, sina Rizal, sina Bonifacio, mga Katipunero, what took them years to organize, to communicate to people, pag nagsusulat sila, ilan lang nakakabasa, what took them years and years to do, potentially, and again, the keyword is potentially, it could take us maybe just a few weeks or months. In other words, it will take us a much shorter time because of the available tools and technology that is at our disposal. Kahit nakahiga ka lang sa kama, meron kang access, pwede mong kausapin ng kaibigan mo na nasa Italy. Pwede mong i-chat yung kaibigan mo na nasa Botswana. At our fingertips, rather. There's so much potential, and it's up to us. And if there's any generation, if there's anyone, any group that will be able to utilize this to expedite that pushing of the wheel that we were talking about earlier, it will come from our generation, from your generation, from the younger generations. nasa sa atin na kung anong gagawin natin sa tools, sa potential na meron tayo. So at the times that we may feel a little bit frustrated, na ba't ganun, ang tagal, ang bagal, ang daming kurap pa rin, yung mga nanalo, ba't ganyan? O, ayoko yung ganyan, or kahit sa private, kumpanya ko, ba't ganito? Di pa rin sila nagbabayad ng tamang buwis. These things that again have been ingrained in our culture. Puro palakasan pa rin, puro ganyan pa rin. Instead of being frustrated, let's be smart. Let's be strategic. Let's not be frustrated. And as long as we keep, like what you're doing now, exchanging ideas, strategizing with like-minded people, continuous preparation, and seizing leadership opportunities as they come, then we can be sure it will be our generation and perhaps the next generation of young leaders that will truly change our nation. So maraming salamat po sa inyo. Thank you again so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mayor Vico Sotto, for that empowering and informative discussion. We surely learned a lot from the start, from the analogy of the wheel to utilizing our tools that we have in the younger generation. And I'm sure, and I'm quite sure that we have a lot of questions. Mayor, may I ask, until what time will you be available for the question and answer?
I can spend 10 or 15 minutes is okay.
All right.
Tingnan natin kung ilan ang kaya natin sagutin.
Okay po, Mayor. So our first question from the FB Live is from Ephraim Cruz. His question is, how can we instill and foster integrity to the young generation, especially to the students who will be future leaders of our country?
Wow, that's a very tough question to answer. Una, siguro leadership by example. Mahirap magturo ng isang bagay na hindi mo ginagawa. Mahirap maging ipokrito eh. So if you want other people to, especially younger people, to lead with integrity, you have to do it yourself first. And this is something na can easily be, madaling makita kung pinipeke. You can fake it for some time, but eventually makikita yan. Mahuhuli at mahuhuli rin yan. So again, leadership example, but it's also important to build networks of people, like-minded people. I think that's part of what you're doing now. So little things.
Yes, thank you for that. Now we have our next question from one of our Zoom participants. Miss Pia Regalado, you can unmute yourself and tell your question personally.
Hi, Mayor Vico. Good afternoon po. Ay, nakamute siya. Una po, Mayor, saan maganda tumira sa Pasig? De, joke lang. Just kidding. Question lang po, what Christian values help you as you lead Pasig, and how does it affect your policy making? How does it affect policy making under your leadership?
Okay, well, yung overarching naman dyan is fear and love of God, di ba? And then, of course, all the other values, especially with regard to integrity, honesty, being compassionate, kasama naman lahat yan. And although, of course, we have separation of church and state, hindi mo naman masiseparate yung values na sinasabuhay mo dun sa trabaho mo.
Okay po, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pia Regalado. Now, up next, we have Anre Daniela Talaga. If you would like to open your microphone to state your question.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
So, yung question ko po sa inyo, di ba sinasabi nila na ang leader kailangan maging extrovert or kailangan kaya niya makipag-usap sa mga tao and etc. So, di ba po parang sinabi niyo yung bata kayo, shy type kayo. So, paano kayo lumabas ng comfort zone niyo and naglingkod for the people?
Thank you for that question. Una, I disagree that leaders should be extroverts. Maybe there's a correlation People with positions are more likely to be extroverts, but it shouldn't be the case. Kahit anong personality test na kunin ko, dun ako lagi sa introvert side, ano. Hindi naman extreme, pero nandun ako sa scale na yon, ano. So, it definitely, especially when I ran for public office, nung una ko nga sinabi sa sa pamilya ko, na may balak akong tumakbo, that was 2015, for councilor. Gulat talaga sila. Hindi nila ma-imagine, 'di ba? Kasi siyempre 'pag konsehal, mag-house to house ka, marami kang kakausapin, libu-libong tao kakausapin mo. It's difficult for an introvert. But if you again, we ask the question of why before anything else. Yung how o paano, susunod na lang eh. So going out of your comfort zone is a little bit easier, and you'll be a lot more willing to go outside your comfort zone if you know why. Kung alam mo kung ano yung pinaglalaban mo, ano yung purpose mo.
Okay, thank you po.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question po, Mayor Vico, is from an anonymous. So the
Okay.
question is, should student leaders and organizations deprioritize their involvement in national politics and concentrate on school-related issues? He stated na in UP, flawed enrollment system, access to gender-inclusive restrooms, online document processing, curfew system in campus dorms, or 24/7 access to library and student union building?
Ah, to be honest, I'm not sure how to answer that kasi ayoko naman magmagaling o mag-misrepresent sa sarili ko kasi nung college ako, hindi ako ganoon ka-involved sa sanggunian. Sa Ateneo ako nag-college, no? Hindi ako ganoon ka-involved. So, ayoko naman magsabi ng ano tapos sabihin mo, ba't ikaw ginagawa mo ba yan dati? Hindi naman. So, ayoko maging plastic, ano. I don't know the answer. I have the highest respect for people or students who get involved even with national. I think there's a space for both. I don't think you need to choose one or the other. But again, maybe your student leaders would be able to answer that question better.
Thank you po.
Next, we have from Mr. Nico Antonio. Sabi nila, it is better to be hated than loved if you can't be both. Is it applicable in our current system? If so, how would you handle yourself as a leader? What are your thoughts on that, Mayor?
Well, yung better to be hated than loved. Di ba better to be feared than love yung kay Machiavelli? Anyway, better to be hated than love. I don't think I've heard that before. But ikaw naman, ako, basta para sa akin, kung ano yung tingin mong tama, kung ano yung base sa prinsipyo mo, paninindigan mo, kaya nga panindigan mo. Kung tingin mo tama yun, it might not always be the most popular decision. You don't need to make the most popular decision every time. So, siguro tama yun. Yun. Parang gusto ko siyang mas pag-isipan pa ng konti. Ano? Pero, again, if you think you're doing the right thing, then just do it. Of course, there's always, kunwari, ako, nasa politika ako, may elemento, siyempre, nasa demokrasya tayo eh. So kung ano yung sabihin ng mas nakararami, kailangan respetuhin mo yun at some level, di ba? But again, hindi dapat nagko-contradict yun dun sa mga prinsipyo mo. That's a very, very complicated question. It's a very political science question even. Siguro, pwede natin pag-usapan yan ng 3 oras. Hindi tayo mauubusan ng nuances dyan.
Yes, okay. So as much as we want to cater the questions from our audience and live viewers, our speaker for today doesn't have much luxury of time. So we shall proceed to the awarding of the certificate. To express this, to express our appreciation to the efforts given by our dear speakers, allow me to read the content of this certificate. This certificate of appreciation is given to Honorable Vico Sotto for sharing his knowledge as one of the key speakers on Powerhouse 2020 Youth Leadership, given this 27th of November 2020. This is signed by Nina Ariel Segi, the event head, and Ms. Janome Arevalo, the president.
Now, of course, like earlier, we will not let this moment pass without capturing this very momentous and once in a lifetime experience. For that reason, may I request those who can and who are willing to turn their cameras on as we take photos with our guest speakers. Mr. Jaino, please join us as well.
Okay.
Tech, do we have someone to take the photo already? All right.
Baka nakasmile lang tayo lahat dito. Picture.
So we will be going from frame to frame again, so everyone will have the opportunity to have a picture with our speakers for today's event.
Habang nagpipicture tayo, nakita ko yung isa nagtatanong anong libro daw magandang basahin. Kung gusto niyo medyo mas technical or mas yung, in practice, I mentioned Jim Collins, Good to Great, Built to Last. Pero ako tingin ko as leaders, maganda magbasa tayo ng history, both internationally. Internationally, gusto ko yung mga about Lincoln, pero locally din, yung mga sinulat din from Jose Rizal to Mabini, we should learn from history.
Yes, that's correct. So we have Ian from the Rhetoricians. Can you please take a photo frame by frame?
Okay.
Okay guys, game 1, 2, 3. One more po sa ibang page.
Nag-selfie ka lang yata, Ian eh.
Ay, hindi po.
Hindi ba?
Okay, game. 1, 2, 3. Game. Wait. Page 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Page 5. 1, 2, 3. Next. 1, 2, 3. Next. Last page. 1, 2, 3. Okay na po.
Alright. Thank you. Pasensya na kung medyo bitin sa oras. Meron kasi ang 5 p.m. meeting din. But again, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a good time with all of you.
Yes,
Salamat
thank you
po.
too.
Ingat kayo. Stay safe,
Thank you
everyone.
very,
Thank
thank
you
you very
po.
much.
Thank you
Thank
po.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
po.
po.
Thank you po.